Arrogant CEO fires a janitor unaware he's a retired Special Forces operative. Hello and welcome to our channel where we bring you inspiring stories twice a week. Please like and subscribe to show your support. In the sleek glass towers of Titan Industries, tension and ambition buzzed. Employees rushed through corridors, eyes glued to screens, minds racing with deadlines and targets. At the center of this corporate beehive sat Alan Grant, the CEO of Titan Industries. His top-floor office, with its panoramic city view, made him feel untouchable. Alan, in his early 50s, had sharp features and eyes that reflected his cold, calculated nature. Dressed in expensive suits with meticulously styled hair, he exuded power and control. As Alan stared down from his window, a smug smile crept onto his face. Profits were up, and that was all that mattered. A knock on his door broke his thoughts. "Come in," he barked without turning around. His assistant, a young woman named Jessica, nervously entered. "Mr. Grant, the board meeting is about to start." Alan nodded curtly. "I'll be there in a minute. And make sure those accounting reports are on my desk by noon. No excuses." Jessica quickly nodded and scurried out. Alan straightened his tie and strode towards the boardroom, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. The room fell silent as he entered, and the executives straightened in their seats, mixing fear with admiration. "We're cutting to the chase," Alan started, skipping pleasantries. "Our profits are up, but not nearly enough. I want a 20% increase by next quarter. Cut costs, boost productivity, fire the dead weight, just make it happen." The meeting dragged on with Alan dismissing concerns and crushing ideas that didn't align with his relentless pursuit of profit. By the end, the executives left the room drained and defeated. As Alan returned to his office, he passed by the cleaning staff preparing for their evening shift. He paid them little attention, seeing them as mere fixtures. Among them was Jack Martin, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and a weathered face. Jack moved efficiently through the halls, pushing his cleaning cart with quiet precision. For 2 years, he had worked at Titan Industries, doing his job diligently and without fuss. Most employees barely noticed him, and that was how Jack preferred it. Jack listened in silence as employees whispered about impossible deadlines and fears of layoffs. He cleaned the break room, where 2 junior executives gossiped. "Did you hear about the latest firing?" one asked. "Grant axed the entire marketing team because their campaign didn't boost sales enough." "That's typical Grant," the other replied. "He'd sell his own mother for a bump in the stock price." Jack emptied the trash and wiped down the tables, seemingly oblivious to the conversation, but his sharp eyes took in every detail. As the weeks passed, pressure at Titan Industries mounted. Alan pushed his employees harder, demanding longer hours and better results. The office atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Through it all, Jack continued his nightly routine, cleaning offices with the same quiet efficiency. If he noticed the growing stress, he showed no sign. One evening, as Jack was cleaning the executive bathroom, he overheard Alan berating an employee over the phone. "I don't care about your family emergency," Alan snarled. "Close that deal by tomorrow or start looking for a new job." Jack paused, his grip tightening on the mop handle. Then, without a word, he resumed his work. The tensions at Titan Industries boiled over during the company's annual gala. Held in a grand hotel ballroom, the event was attended by hundreds of employees and clients. Alan stood at the center, champagne in hand, wearing a practiced smile. Jack was there too, working as part of the catering team. He moved through the crowd, unnoticed as most guests took food from his tray without a glance. As the night wore on, Alan's facade began to slip under the influence of too much alcohol. He berated a young server over a minor mistake, leaving her in tears. Jack watched from across the room, his face impassive but his eyes never straying far from Alan. The pivotal moment came when someone bumped into Jack from behind, causing him to stumble forward and spill his tray of red wine onto Alan's expensive white suit. A hush fell over the crowd. Alan's face flushed red with anger. "You clumsy idiot," he shouted. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? More than you make in a year, I'm sure." Jack stood calmly. "I apologize, sir. It was an accident." But Alan was beyond reasoning. "You're a worthless janitor. People like you are a dime a dozen. I could replace you in a heartbeat." Jack remained silent, his eyes steady on Alan. There was a resolve in Jack's gaze that might have given Alan pause if he were sober enough to notice. "In fact, you're fired," Alan continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "I don't want to see your face here again. You're useless." The ballroom was silent as Jack set down his tray. "I understand, Mr. Grant. I'll collect my things and leave." Alan sneered. "And don't think about suing us. I've got an army of lawyers who'll bury you." Without another word, Jack walked out. The guests parted to let him pass, most avoiding eye contact. Jack's calm demeanor hid the tension in his shoulders and the purposefulness in his stride. As he changed out of his catering uniform, his mind was already working. He hadn't expected the job to last forever, but this was not how he envisioned the end. Sarah Mills, the head of HR, approached Jack, her face creased with concern. "Jack, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" Jack shook his head, offering a small smile. "No need to apologize, Miss Mills. These things happen." Sarah frowned. "But it's not right. Mr. Grant's behavior was unprofessional. We could fight this dismissal if you want." Jack's eyes softened. "I appreciate the offer, but it's not necessary. Sometimes it's best to know when to walk away." Sarah studied him, sensing there was more to Jack than met the eye. "You're taking this remarkably well, Jack. Most would be angry or upset." Jack shrugged. "I faced worse than an angry boss, Miss Mills. This is just another chapter closing." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "I've always felt there was something different about you, Jack." Jack picked up his box. "We all have our stories, Miss Mills. Mine just happens to be a bit longer than most." As Jack walked towards the elevator, Sarah called after him. "Jack, if you ever need anything, a reference or someone to talk to, please reach out." Jack nodded, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Miss Mills. Your kindness won't be forgotten." As Jack left, employees gathered around Sarah, murmuring their sympathy. "He didn't deserve that," one said. Sarah nodded, her eyes still on the closed elevator doors. "No, he didn't. And I have a feeling there's more to Jack Martin than we ever knew." Meanwhile, across town, Victor Russo, a ruthless gangster, sat at the head of a dimly lit table surrounded by his top lieutenants. "Our next target is Titan Industries," he declared. "It's perfect for our money laundering operations." He spread documents across the table, financial reports, employee records, and building schematics. "Our inside man has provided us with everything we need. Titan's vulnerable, and its CEO, Alan Grant, is arrogant enough to make our job easier." "What's our approach?" one of Victor's men asked. Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We start with intimidation. Make Grant realize he's not untouchable. If he's smart, he'll cooperate. If not..." Victor's hand moved to the gun at his side. "We'll take more direct action." The next day, Alan arrived at his office, focused on boosting profits. As he settled behind his desk, his assistant entered with a nervous look. "Mr. Grant, this was delivered for you. It's marked urgent." Alan snatched the envelope and tore it open. His face paled slightly as he read the contents. A threat, plain and simple, detailing knowledge of Titan's financial dealings, including some that skirted legality. The letter demanded a large sum of money for silence, with warnings of dire consequences if ignored. For a moment, Alan felt a flicker of fear, but it quickly turned to anger. "Ignore it," he snapped. "It's probably some scam. I don't have time for this nonsense." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we inform the authorities?" Alan scoffed. "And admit someone's trying to blackmail us? Absolutely not. It would tank our stock prices. Increase security if you must, but it's business as usual." The threats escalated over the next few weeks. More letters arrived, each more menacing than the last. Strange men were seen lurking around Titan's headquarters, and employees reported being followed home. Despite growing unease, Alan remained stubborn. dismissing the danger and pushing forward with business as usual. One evening, as Alan worked late, his phone rang. "Who is this?" Alan demanded. "How did you get this number?" "My name is Victor," the voice replied calmly. "I believe you've received my messages." Alan's grip tightened on the phone. "So, you're the one behind these pathetic threats. Listen here, you lowlife." Victor cut him off. "No, Mr. Grant, you listen. You have one last chance to cooperate. Transfer the money by midnight or face the consequences." Alan flushed with anger. "You don't scare me, Victor. I've dealt with better men than you. Try anything, and I'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again." Victor's voice turned dangerously soft. "Very well, Mr. Grant. Remember this moment." The line went dead, and Alan slammed the phone down, his hand shaking slightly. Had he made a mistake? But he quickly dismissed the thought. He was Alan Grant. He didn't back down. 2 days later, Titan's headquarters was bustling with the usual mix of stress and ambition. Alan sat in his office, reviewing reports and barking orders over the phone. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing the offices in an eerie, dim light. Alan stormed out of his office. What the hell is going on? Before anyone could answer, the elevator doors opened, and men in black tactical gear poured out, faces masked and weapons drawn. Screams erupted as employees realized what was happening. "Nobody move!" one of the masked men shouted. "This is a takeover. Cooperate and no one gets hurt." Alan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the scene. This couldn't be happening. Not to him, not to his company. Victor emerged from the group of intruders, removing his mask to reveal a scarred face and cold eyes. "Mr. Grant," Victor said with mock politeness, "I believe we have unfinished business." Alan's shock turned to anger. "You won't get away with this. Do you have any idea who I am?" Victor grabbed Alan by the throat. "I know exactly who you are. A fool who thought he was untouchable." He released Alan, who gasped for air. "Now, you're going to learn just how wrong you were." Victor turned to his men. "Secure the building. Round up all the employees. Mr. Grant and I are going to have a little chat in his office." Victor's men spread out, herding terrified employees into groups. Victor pushed Alan back into his office, the door closing with a finality that echoed ominously. Outside, chaos reigned. Sarah from HR tried to calm a group of panicked interns, while others attempted to call for help, only to find communications cut off. Victor's men moved with military precision, turning the office into an impenetrable fortress. Meanwhile, police gathered outside, alerted by concerned passersby who had seen the armed men. But they were at a loss, unable to breach the fortified building. Inside, Victor lounged in Alan's chair, feet propped up on the desk. "Now, Mr. Grant," Victor said calmly, "let's discuss the future of Titan Industries. I think you'll find I can be quite persuasive." Alan's mind raced for an escape, but as he looked into Victor's eyes, he realized with horror that his options had run out. The consequences of his arrogance were about to come crashing down on him and everyone in the building. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Titan Industries stood silent and besieged. Inside, employees huddled together, faces etched with fear. Armed men patrolled the floors, their weapons a constant reminder of the danger everyone was in. In his office, Alan sat slumped, his usual confidence shattered. Victor paced before him, outlining his plans for Titan Industries in chilling detail. The company Alan had built, the empire he had ruled, was slipping through his fingers. Outside, police lights flashed, and a crowd of onlookers gathered. News vans pulled up, their reporters eager for information. As night fell, tension inside the building continued to build. Victor's men grew more agitated, fingers twitching on triggers. The hostages, including Alan, wondered how long this nightmare would last and how it would end. In the main office, Sarah Mills huddled with a group of frightened employees, her mind racing for a solution. Suddenly, she remembered Jack Martin, the janitor who had been fired weeks ago. She recalled his calm demeanor and the way he handled pressure. There was always something different about him, something she couldn't quite place. With shaking hands, Sarah pulled out her phone. By some miracle, she still had a signal. She scrolled through her contacts and found Jack's number, kept for reference checks. Taking a deep breath, she pressed call. Miles away, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, recognizing the number. "Miss Mills?" he answered, his voice calm and steady. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I know this is strange, but we need help. We're being held hostage. I felt I had to call you. You always seemed so capable." Jack's face hardened as he listened. "I understand, Miss Mills. Stay calm. I'll be there soon." Ending the call, Jack's mind shifted gears. The calm, unassuming janitor facade fell away, replaced by the sharp focus of a trained operative. He moved swiftly, gathering his gear. As he suited up, memories flooded back. His time in special forces, missions gone wrong, the sounds of gunfire and explosions. Jack shook his head, pushing the memories aside. His skills were needed again. Within minutes, Jack was driving towards Titan Industries. He parked discreetly, studying the building and picking out entry points and weaknesses. He recognized the tactics of the hostage-takers. These were not amateurs. Moving silently, Jack approached the service entrance. Using a sleeper hold, he rendered the guard unconscious without a sound. Inside, Jack moved like a shadow, using his knowledge of the building to navigate through rarely used corridors. In the security room, he accessed the camera feeds. What he saw made his blood run cold. The hostage-takers were heavily armed and well-organized, controlling all main areas with hostages gathered in several locations. At the center was Alan Grant, held separately by a man Jack assumed was Victor. Jack's jaw clenched. This was worse than he had anticipated. These were trained professionals, possibly ex-military. He needed all his skills to handle this. Moving away from the security room, Jack found a maintenance closet he had used as a janitor. Behind a loose panel, he retrieved a small cache of tools and weapons he had stashed away. Jack had always believed in being prepared, a habit from his military days. As he geared up, Jack felt a familiar calm. Muscle memory took over as he checked and loaded his weapons. This was what he was trained for. Quietly, Jack moved through the building. His first priority was to thin out the hostage-takers without raising the alarm. He needed to create confusion among their ranks. On the third floor, Jack encountered two armed men patrolling a hallway. Timing his move perfectly, he struck in a flurry of precise, silent movements, incapacitating both before they could react. He secured them, hiding their bodies in a nearby office. Jack continued his silent assault, floor by floor. Each encounter was quick, efficient, and quiet. In the main office, he observed a group of employees guarded by three armed men. Using a small mirror, Jack created a distraction to lure one guard away. In seconds, all three guards were down, and the hostages watched in stunned silence. Among them was Sarah, who stared at Jack in disbelief. Gone was the quiet janitor she knew. In his place stood a man of lethal efficiency. "Jack," she whispered, her voice a mix of relief and shock. Jack signaled for silence and quickly ushered the group to a safer location, giving them instructions on how to stay hidden. As Jack continued his one-man assault, word spread among the hostage-takers that something was wrong. Men were disappearing, and communication was breaking down. Fear and confusion spread among their ranks. In the command center, Victor received reports of the disturbance, his face darkening with anger. "Find out what's going on," he barked. "I want this threat neutralized now." But Jack was always one step ahead. His training and experience honed his instincts to a razor's edge. He anticipated the hostage-takers' moves and used their own tactics against them. As Jack worked his way through the building, the tide began to turn. The once organized operation crumbled, and the criminals' confidence faded. Panic set in as they realized they were up against something unexpected. In his office, Alan listened to the chaos outside with a mix of fear and hope. Something was happening, something that was throwing his captors into disarray. But what or who was behind it? Jack's progress was relentless. Each encounter showcased his skills: hand-to-hand combat, weapons proficiency, tactical awareness. Jack was a one-man army. The remaining criminals, now aware of the threat, grouped together for protection, but this only made Jack's job easier. He used their fear against them, employing psychological tactics to break down their morale further. As the night wore on, the situation inside Titan Industries had shifted dramatically. What started as a well-executed hostage situation had devolved into chaos, with Jack at the center of it all. Outside, the police and onlookers remained unaware of the dramatic events unfolding inside. But soon, the world would learn of the janitor who saved Titan Industries. Jack paused to catch his breath. He had cleared most of the building, but the hardest part remained. Victor was still in the CEO's office with Alan. Jack knew this final confrontation would be the most dangerous. As he prepared for the last phase of his mission, Jack allowed himself a grim smile. The quiet life he had built was over, but he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought buried, the part that excelled in chaos and danger. With renewed determination, Jack moved towards the CEO's office. The final showdown was about to begin, and Jack was ready for whatever came next. As Jack neared the office, he could hear Victor's agitated voice. "What do you mean you can't find him?" Victor shouted. "It's one man. How hard can it be?" Jack took a deep breath, then burst through the door with explosive force. The scene inside froze for a moment. Victor stood behind Alan's desk, a phone in one hand and a gun in the other. Alan was tied to a chair, his face bruised and eyes wide with shock. Victor fired 2 shots, but Jack rolled to the side, taking cover behind a filing cabinet. "Who the hell are you?" Victor snarled, his gun trained on Jack's position. Jack's voice was calm. "Just the janitor, here to clean up your mess." Victor's face twisted with rage. "The janitor? You're the one who's been taking down my men." Jack could see Alan's face, his expression shifting from fear to disbelief. Alan recognized his former employee. "Victor," Jack said steadily, "you're outmatched. Your men are down and the police will be here soon. It's over." Victor laughed bitterly. "Over? I don't think so. I still have the CEO. As long as I have him, I have leverage." Jack's mind raced, assessing the situation. He needed to separate Victor from Alan without endangering the CEO. "You're right," Jack said casually. "You do have leverage. But what's your endgame here? The building is surrounded. There's no way out." Doubt flickered across Victor's face. Jack pressed his advantage using psychological tactics from his training. "Your men are either unconscious or have fled. You're alone. Even if you get out of this room, where will you go?" Victor's grip tightened on his gun. "Shut up. I'm the one in control." Jack continued calmly. "Are you? Look at your situation, Victor. Really look. You started this thinking you'd take over a company. Now you're trapped, your plan in shambles. Is this how you pictured it ending?" Victor's composure cracked, his eyes darting around the room. In that moment of distraction, Jack made his move. He vaulted over the filing cabinet, closing the distance between them with incredible speed. Victor fired wildly, but Jack was already upon him. In a blur of motion, Jack disarmed Victor, the gun clattering to the floor. They grappled in a fierce hand-to-hand fight. Victor was strong, but Jack was in a league of his own. Each of Jack's moves was precise and devastating. Alan watched in awe as Jack, once his janitor, fought the dangerous criminal. Jack's movements were a far cry from the quiet man who used to clean the offices. This was a highly trained operative in action. The fight was intense but brief. Within minutes, Jack had Victor pinned to the ground, his arm twisted painfully behind his back. "It's over, Victor," Jack said, his breathing barely labored. "Don't make this worse." Victor struggled for a moment before going limp. The fight drained out of him. "Who are you?" he gasped. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he secured Victor with zip ties, then turned to Alan. "Are you all right, Mr. Grant?" Jack asked as he untied the CEO. Alan rubbed his wrists, staring at Jack with a mix of gratitude and bewilderment. "Jack, I don't understand. How did you?" Jack gave a small smile. It's a long story, sir. One I'm sure we'll have time for later. Just then, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The police, having been alerted that the situation was under control, were finally entering the building. Jack turned to Victor, who lay defeated on the floor. "Looks like your ride is here." As they waited for the police, Alan couldn't take his eyes off Jack, trying to reconcile the quiet janitor with the skilled operative he had witnessed. "Jack," Alan said, his voice hoarse, "I was wrong about you. So wrong. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Jack nodded, accepting the apology without comment. His focus remained on securing the area and ensuring everyone's safety. Soon, the office was swarming with police officers. They took Victor and his men into custody. Paramedics arrived to treat the injured, including Alan. As the police operation continued, Jack stood aside, giving his statement to a detective. Alan watched, still trying to process the night's events. Sarah Mills approached Alan, her face etched with concern. "Mr. Grant, are you all right? We were so worried." Alan nodded absently, his eyes still on Jack. "Did you know about Jack?" "I mean," Sarah shook her head. "Not really, sir. I just always felt there was more to him. That's why I called him when this started." Alan's eyebrows shot up. "You called him? You're the reason he came back." Sarah nodded, a small smile on her face. "Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts, sir." As the night wore on, the full scale of Jack's actions became clear. He had single-handedly taken down a dangerous criminal group, saved countless lives, and prevented a catastrophic situation for Titan Industries. The media was in a frenzy, eager for details about the hero janitor. But Jack shied away from the attention, preferring to remain in the background. As dawn broke, the last of the police left Titan Industries. Jack stood outside, watching the sunrise when Alan approached. "Jack," Alan said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I don't even know how to thank you. You saved my life, my company, everything." Jack turned to face his former employer. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Grant. I did what needed to be done." Alan shook his head. "No, I do need to thank you, and I need to apologize. The way I treated you was inexcusable. I was arrogant, dismissive. I judged you based on your job without seeing the person behind it." Jack remained silent, letting Alan continue. "I've learned a hard lesson today," Alan admitted, "about judging people, about the value of everyone in an organization. I was so focused on profits and power that I lost sight of what really matters." Jack nodded, a small smile on his face. "That's a valuable lesson, Mr. Grant. I hope you remember it." Alan straightened, determination in his eyes. "I will, Jack, and I want to make things right. Come back to Titan not as a janitor but in a role that suits your skills, head of security or any position you want. Name it and it's yours." Jack chuckled softly. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Grant, but I'll have to decline. My quiet life as a janitor is over, but I'm not looking to jump back into the corporate world." Alan looked crestfallen. "I understand, but if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. Titan will always have a place for you." Jack nodded his thanks. As he turned to leave, Alan called out one last time. "Jack, what will you do now?" Jack paused, glancing back at the Titan building and then at the city beyond. "I'm not sure, Mr. Grant, but I have a feeling my skills might still be needed. There are always messes to clean up, one way or another." With that, Jack walked away, disappearing into the early morning crowd. Alan watched him go, a mix of gratitude and regret washing over him. As the sun rose fully, casting light over Titan Industries, Alan stood alone, a changed man. The night's events had shaken him, forcing him to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about leadership, success, and the value of every individual. Inside, employees began arriving, murmuring in shock at the signs of the night's events. Sarah greeted them, offering reassurance and support. The Titan Industries they walked into today was not the same as the one they had left yesterday. Change was coming, sparked by the unlikely hero who had once walked these halls unnoticed. And somewhere in the city, Jack Martin walked on, ready for whatever challenge might come next. The quiet janitor was gone, but in his place stood a man who had rediscovered his purpose. The world might not know his name, but it would feel the impact of his actions for years to come. As Titan Industries began its process of recovery and renewal, the legend of the hero janitor spread. It served as a reminder that heroes can come from the most unexpected places and that every person, regardless of their position, has value and potential. The night's events had changed everything for Alan, for Titan, and for Jack. But as the city woke to a new day, one thing was certain. The impact of Jack Martin, the unassuming janitor turned hero, would be felt for a long time to come. Please join this family of story lovers by subscribing. It's free and it helps this channel grow. Also, kindly like this video. Until next time, stay inspired, one story at a time.